Hello, 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 and welcome to our episode 3 of our Just Love Collective book circles. My name is Phyllis Brooks, and I'm one of the co leaders for Just Love Collective. And I am so delighted to welcome this afternoon or morning if you are in the Southern Hemisphere and watching my two conversation partners for our book this afternoon. So I would like to actually have them introduce themselves and locate themselves. And I'll start by saying I identify as an Afro-Caribbean American person. I grew up in the Caribbean. I identify as a Christian. I am Seventh-day Adventist. And while I wasn't raised in the Adventist church my whole life, I definitely grew up in a home that centered the gospel and Jesus. And that has been my way and journey of life. It's everything to me. It's the center of everything that I do. Whether or not I was a clergy person, I would be following Jesus because that was just the way that I grew up. One of the things that drew me to reading this book, Native by Kaitlin Curtice, has been my experience as an Afro-Caribbean person just navigating living in the United States and having had the privilege of being in different parts of the world and just seeing how people groups and ethnicities and communities have come to the gospel, how they've come to understand themselves in God. And so I'm delighted to welcome Giovanna Porbear Adams to our conversation today and Linnea Strickland. And Giovanna, I'll start with you. Could you say a little bit about yourself? How do you locate yourself and just who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am Native American from the United States, but I am specifically from the Oglala Lakota tribe from the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota. My Lakota name is Wahia Ishtapiwi, which means lightning eyes woman. Currently, I'm a doctoral student and I am the superintendent of the Iowa Missouri Conference of Seventh day Adventists. I am Seventh Day Adventist. My family, we attend church. We pray together as a family. I am Christian, although I was raised traditional within the traditional beliefs of my tribe.
Okay, wonderful. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank
Linnea,
you.
yeah.
Uh, Kia ora. My name is Lania Strickland, ko matawhaura te manga, ko rotoroa nui, ko roto iti te roto, ko Ngāti Tamatea Tūtahi te hapu, mai maketu ki Tongariro, ko Lania Strickland ahau. So that my native language is Māori, and I come from Aotearoa, New Zealand. And the way when we greet each other, we say what our mountain is. So I said that my mountain is Matawhaura, and usually you have a river, but I have a lake, and our lake is called Roto Iti, and my people, my tribe is called Ngāti Tamatea Tūtahi. And we also identify to a waka, and there were seven great canoes that came across Te Moana Nui a Kiwa, which is the Pacific Ocean, and travelled from Hawaii Nui, Hawaii Roa, which is our ancestral land in Polynesia. And so of the seven waka that came across, my waka is called Te Arawa, and I also stated my tribal boundaries, which is from Maketu ki Tongariro, the mountain Tongariro. So I just greeted you, formally how we usually do here in New Zealand. Currently, I'm the principal of the Rotorua Seventh-day Adventist School. I'm the longest serving employee there and have been there for many years. I'm struggling to think of how old I do it by how old my children are. So, so I have three children, Monica, Marshall, and Malachi,
Uh-huh.
and a wonderful husband. His name is Dwayne Strickland, and he's currently the pastor of our church here.
Mhm.
And I was actually brought up. I'll share more about my story of faith. My when I was born into a very strong Mormon family,
Mm-hmm.
and my yeah, so and then my mother found her. I guess she was searching for God, and so she left the church, and then that was not a thing kind of to do in the union. So we moved into the Seventh Day Adventist church. She met her new husband there, and so when I was five, I attended the Seventh Day Adventist school. I've done all my schooling through there, and yeah, so uh, yeah, I what do I yeah, that's me. It's quite a while to get to know each other, but yeah, I'm very, very. This is my first time, so
Yes.
I'm quite new, but really excited to talk on this book, Native,
Yes.
to be a part of Just Love Collective. So thank you very much for inviting me, and I look forward to our conversations today.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Giovanna and Linnea, thank you so much for being here and just giving us a window into your Indigenous culture. Giovanna, I told you last year when I heard you say your name how it gave me goosebumps, and it did again. Linnea, as you were greeting us in your native language, it did the same thing. It's just beautiful to be able to hear the language of native people as part of our everyday conversation. For too long, it's been silenced. And so I'm really thankful for just you all just stepping into your the fullness of who you are as we begin this conversation. One of my favorite authors is a woman named Chimamanda, and she is known for her TED Talk, "The Danger of a Single Story." I don't know if you've ever um, heard her, but she's just amazing. And Chimamanda, talks about the importance of knowing more than one story, right? Because single stories create this idea in our minds. It helps to feed stereotypes and biases, and it causes us to other people and eliminate whole experiences. And as people who read scripture, we know that the Bible teaches us that all humanity is made in the image of God. So Christianity ought to be something that brings us together, not erasing our stories, but allows us to come together as image bearers of God in this central place around Jesus. And so uh, I listened to the book. For those of you who are purists, no, I didn't buy the book and read it page by page. I listened to the book way my life is right now. But I listened to this book by Kaitlin Curtice, and it's Native Identity, Belonging, and Rediscovering God. And it's a memoir, right? And she explores her journey of reclaiming her Potawatomi heritage as she navigated her Christian faith. She grew up in a context where she was disconnected from her native identity. And so she writes about this process of decolonizing her spirituality and understanding God. And so I'm wondering, as we've listened to and or read or reflected on parts of her book, um, what how do you understand your identity concerning the various communities you belong to? I know for me, Afro-Caribbean is mine, right? Like I don't know my tribe, right? I don't have a location. I don't have a mountain. I don't have a body of water. I don't have a place that's been set aside that I can go back to and say my people came from here. Did a DNA test, and I know that I have more Nigerian in me than any other um, group of people from the continent of Africa. I do know that my ancestors came from Africa, but I don't have a home, right? And so I'm just curious for both of you. Um, how do you understand identity concerning the communities you belong to? And did you have any tensions um, as you lived out your Christian faith growing up with your native identities?
Hi. So I'll go ahead and start if that's okay.
Yes.
Okay. So something that you mentioned, you're saying like this concept of home. and feeling like I don't have like a home or a homeland that I can go back to, because that's the biggest thing, is like my homeland. So being in the Midwest, for me, like especially coming back to the Midwest, now I see, like when I go places, much like she said in the book, like Caitlin talked about, when she would move to a new place, she would go to the river or
Mhm.
go to the trees and say, like, think what her people, how they reacted, or how they responded to the water or to the nature that they were in. For me, coming to the Midwest is coming to my homeland again, and so that is very like, it's life giving.
Mhm.
Also, even when I'm not in what I would consider my homeland, I feel home when I'm with my people as well. And not just the Lakota people, but like when I'm in the Southwest, when I'm with Indigenous people and we are celebrating culture. Like I was in Scottsdale, Phoenix area, and going to the Herd Museum, or
Mhm.
going to see the hoop dancers, or going to a powwow in those places. When we're celebrating culture together, when we're celebrating a people and have being a part of that community, that also feels like home. And I think I've had enough students. I've been in classrooms, especially in college. There was one time in one of my classes at Union. It's Union Adventist University now, but it was Union College at the time.
Yeah.
I was taking a rhetoric class, and we were talking about culture and what different things say about the people that they represent. And one of my classmates, a Caucasian classmate, said, "I have no culture," and she was very distraught. Like, it's not fair that she doesn't have a culture,
Mm.
and that made me very sad for her. But also, this thing is like, because she had that same kind of concept. Where's my homeland?
Mm.
Like, where is my place? But
Mhm.
it's people, and it's that celebration. So I think that a part of that is identifying, finding where your culture is, and there are more than one place where we find that culture. I feel home at my Adventist camp meetings,
Mhm.
when we're going and I'm taking my kids from classroom to classroom, and they're learning how to sing songs in that in the to God, to these Christian songs, and
Mhm.
learning their Bible verses. I feel the culture and the home there as
Mhm.
well. But
Mhm.
then I also go to native camp meetings,
Mhm.
and there's another community there, and that there's another kind of beauty in that place as well. So it's
Mhm.
about where you find that community.
Mhm. Mhm. Wow. Wow. What about you, Linnea?
Um, we have a saying. Well, we kind of live in two worlds. That's what I took from her first kind of chapters. And I was at the Māori principals. We have a group where all the Māori principals in New Zealand meet, and we had the president of the New Zealand Principal Federation, and she's a Māori woman, and she shared the same thoughts, that we walk in two worlds. There's isolation and expectation. There's the expectation from Māori, so there's expectations on me as
Mhm.
a Māori leader, that we have to be the voice,
Mhm.
the advocate,
Mhm.
and then there's the expectation of our colleagues or our churches, that we have to fit in to the existing structures that we have. And she really impressed me. She was a Catholic woman and educator, and it just resonated with me because I am on my own land, and I'm so blessed. I look to our native people, and we each have our tribe, and we each have our areas. And in New Zealand, we call it, when we stand on our land, it's called your tūranga waiwai. It's your homeland, and when you stand, you have a right to stand, and you have a right to speak, and you're the keeper of the land. We call it the kaitiakitanga. We're very invested in our environment and caring for it, and acknowledging, like, when I shared my mountain, we we can identify where a person is from when they say what their mountain is. We can say, oh, okay, I know that person is from that area. I know this family from this area, and very much our genealogy as well. So we also have an ancient saying, he kāka noa hou I ruia mai I rangiatia, which means I, I am a seed that is born of greatness, that goes right back to um, rangiatia, the beginnings of, of our time.
Mhm.
And yeah, so I just totally resonated with the book overall in general. Um, and I just picking up parts of it as well. She talked about she's both the colonizer and the colonized. And
Mm.
I'm half Maori, and I have English and Irish and Scottish settler history as well that I'm very proud of.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, there's a sense of there's two worlds that I stand in.
Mhm.
Um, very often, and yeah, the struggle that I find here in New Zealand is that there's only the one side that is often heard, and I heard you talking about how Indigenous voices are not heard, and that's why I try very hard to speak our reo. Te reo is our Māori language, because that's one of the ways that we're able to kind of reclaim our history. Number one, because all the stories are heard through your language, and I know we'll get into that
Mhm.
a little bit later.
Yeah.
And also, another thing that she pointed out is that there's this sense of in the first part of her book, she was saying there's a sense of there's so much due to colonization. There's so much stigma placed on, or stereotyping placed on. Oh, if you're from this culture, then you must be this way. Like we in New Zealand, because of the effects of trauma, they just say, oh, they're just alcoholics. They just laze around. They don't know how to get a job. And in fact, or a lot of I've heard it. I presented at the Big Camp meeting on our Treaty of Waitangi, which is our founding document here in New Zealand. And one of the people stood up and said, "Oh, why don't they want to get a real job? They just want to do trades. They're just labourers. Are they even able to? Why don't they aspire to be other things?" But they don't understand the history, in that we had a Native X legislation that pretty much siphoned you into, you know, Maori women are to be farmers' wives, and Maori men are just to be tradesmen and labourers. And you look around at at what's happened to us, and it's true. But there's a whole history, and there's a whole kind of reasoning as to why we've got to this place where we are. Um, and I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted by the comments too. um, yeah, but yeah, the sense of land is very strong for us here. I'm very privileged to for a while when I was young, I didn't live in my tribal area, and I always had a sense of, and I saw it in her book too, where she was in, I think, Sweetwater Creek,
Mhm.
but she knew that her people had migrated from Michigan or somewhere like that.
Mhm.
And we have, yeah, for a lot for me, part of my history, part of who I am, is that my people were forcibly removed from from where from where my tribe is. In fact,
Mhm.
one of my tribe, I have a few, I can, genealogy is huge where we're from, because um, to be able to, you must know your, we call it whakapapa, you know who your father was, your grandfather, your great grandfather. to be able to stand. So, um, in one of my tribes, we were forcibly removed off, and she talked about the Trail of Tears, and
Hmm.
we call it Tiara Roimata, where we were removed from our land. And so, yeah, I know I can understand both sides being able to stand on your land and just having that sense, because what it brings is a sense of belonging.
Hmm.
Ultimately, we want to belong and feel like she said, touch the trees and know and have that sense of this is the place where I can stand my turanga waiwai.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Giovanna, I don't know if you want to add anything to that. If not, let me pose this next question.
Go ahead, go ahead.
It'll get us to where I want to go. So let me name the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room for me, and Curtis, like, she nails it right on the head. She talks about the importance of examining how colonialism has shaped Christianity, and she calls for a decolonized approach to faith. And right now on this planet Earth, there is this movement to erase the impact of colonization. And I'm saying that, right? I am saying that. That's what I am. This is what I'm calling what I see happening. So there is this pushback from naming the fact that colonization had a negative impact on everybody, both the colonized and the colonizers, right? That there was a negative impact. And Linnea, what you just described, this call for, why don't you all do more, when you don't know the reason we are doing what we're doing is because that's what we were told to do when our land was
Mm,
taken, right? And as an Afro-Caribbean person who lives in the United States, the way that shows up is, why are African Americans so lazy? Like, why are native born blacks so
yeah,
lazy? Why can't they be like those of us who come from the Caribbean or those of us who come from continental Africa? And when I hear that kind of conversation, I push back and say, wait a minute.
yeah,
The only reason why those of us who come from the Caribbean and come from the continent can do what we do is because of the so-called African American, so-called lazy African Americans who work from sunup to sunset, or as they would say, from can't see to can't see. Right? They worked to pick cotton. They worked
mm,
to build roads. They worked, and they were enslaved, and they were sold. And so we can't pretend that that didn't happen. So
yeah,
when you say these things, we don't get to jump over a whole, hundreds of years of stories. And so
mm.
Curtis calls us to decolonize the way we come to Christian faith. So what does that mean for you? And I'll let you go first, Giovanna.
Okay, Christian faith. Sorry, I'm taking notes as we're going through this because I want to be intentional.
Yeah.
But I do want to comment on, because you guys have both talked about some stereotypes,
Yep.
um, because I come across that a lot in conversations, in my work. So I have managed to, in my time in education, to work myself to a point in the education system. I went from being an eighth grader who was almost not accepted into the ninth grade because of my grades, because I wasn't taking education seriously. But also, the reason I wasn't taking education seriously is because nobody expected me to take it serious. I went to a farmers and ranchers town off the reservation, with native and non native students who were close to the reservation. And my teachers did not expect me to take school seriously because I was a native student. And in fact, I went to school and I was tired and I fell asleep while they were reading at, 13, 14 years old. And I got accused of coming to class hungover or high, when that was not a part of my life. It definitely was after that day, because I was like, if this is all that's expected of me, then that it doesn't matter that I'm trying so hard not to be a part of this life. And so I went from that point, from being there, and now I'm going to be running the Iowa Missouri Conference of Seventh day Adventist Education System. And that is fighting through all of those stereotypes, and me like constantly feeling like I don't deserve to be here. I don't like, I'm not good enough. I don't like, I have to prove myself again and again. And I often feel like I have to be so much more qualified for a position than the person next to me,
Mm,
because if I want a chance at a job, I
mhm,
have to blow people out of the water,
Yeah.
because that's the only way. And this might be just me, this might be just my own thing, but it feels like that's the only way I stand a chance,
mm,
is if I can blow people out of the water. And
mhm,
so, there's a part of me that is like, I'm going for my doctorate. I got my master's. I'm not stopping, and I'm going to keep going. And um, it's I feel like we've had to fight our way each level. But that the reason I'm bringing that up is specifically because of when you mention those stereotypes. I will meet with people. I will talk with them. People ask me questions like, you like, I thought all natives drink alcohol. Like, what do you mean? Or I I thought, like, one of my principals told me that he heard natives were really stinky, and he's like, but you don't stink, and I've been to your house and it doesn't stink.
Mhm.
And so this is it's just, if I've come against these stereotypes again and again, and it seems like I hit them no matter how hard I try to fight them. And I think that what people need to do is recognize that when you're encountering marginalized groups, and specifically because we're talking about Native communities here, you will, unfortunately, you will come across people who affirm those stereotypes for you. You absolutely will. You go on to the reservation, I go on to the reservation. Somebody's going to come and ask me for change. And there might be a liquor store close by. However, you have to you have to intentionally put yourself in places where those stereotypes will be challenged. Instead of driving through the reservation and putting your whole perspective based off of that interaction at the gas station, go to a powwow. Go to a powwow where people are not drinking, they are not using drugs. They are celebrating. They are dancing. They're eating good food, and they're participating as a community. Go to the colleges, the tribal schools that are on the reservation systems, and then you find people trying to do better, make better, to bring up their communities. You have to, as an outsider looking into this new community, intentionally fight the stereotype by putting yourself in positions where you will meet, like, you have to look for contradictions.
mhm. Wow.
Look for the contradiction. You will find them too. You look for the stereotype, you'll find that. You look for contradictions. We're here.
Mhm,
We
mhm,
are here.
mhm. That's powerful. That's powerful. So I'm wondering, when we think about decolonizing, right? Because what you're naming, Giovanna, the stereotypes show up because there's a colonized way of thinking. There was a cause in order for there to be the kinds of reaction. So when Curtis says, here's a quote that I want to read. She says, "I'm wondering how, for all these years, the church has gotten away with so many oppressive acts towards women, indigenous peoples, Black people, other people of color, disabled people, immigrants, those who journey with depression or anxiety, those who grieve, and those who are gender non-binary, transgender, or queer. Can we go to the church and be angry? Can we go to the church and be furious? Can we go to the church and ask questions? Can we go to church and fight against what we believe is wrong within it?" She says, absolutely. Those of us who are angry cannot wait for the church to give us permission, because white supremacy will never give the oppressed permission to be angry.
Mm,
Mm.
That's a mouthful. And
mm,
what she's bringing to the table, what she challenges us to do through the whole book, is decolonize the way we think about faith, right? Any thoughts on that before I go to the next question?
Yeah, like I picked that out as well. And then another towards the end of the book, she said a really interesting thing that resonated with me as a Maori woman, and particularly as a leader as well. She said, when you do start, like for us, we are Kaupapa Māori Church, where, in I've I've determined that we're also in an Indigenous Adventist school.
Mhm.
Um, and to do that, you have to do things differently. To decolonize, you have to think differently. You do things differently. And when you do, I wish I had picked it out on which page it was, but she said you actually get called out as you're the angry black woman. You're
Mhm.
the angry, when you do call it out, it's almost like, oh, what are you doing? You're upsetting the apple cart here. What's going on? Oh, you shouldn't be, it almost feels like I'm doing something wrong because I'm deciding, oh, yeah, it's good for our children to learn a Māori karakia or Māori prayer. So when they go to their marae, which is their ancestral house, and they're asked to stand up, they're able to say a prayer in Māori. And even just that, sometimes it's just like, oh, why were you so upset? Or why were you angry? Or it's like, what do you mean, why am I angry? I'm angry because you're telling me I can't speak my language in the church, or I have to leave who I am. These children have to leave who they are at the gate before they go into church. Why can't we accept them as they are? Why can't they just come in and be children of God and retain their culture, retain their heritage, retain their nativeness?
Mhm.
But we've been called, oh, you just wear your grass skirts and dance around kind of thing when
Mhm.
we've done our formal welcome. Or this is my latest one. Or they tell me, oh, you're not a real Adventist. You're not real. And then like it just kind of it really does. It hurts and it shakes you to the core. But if we start peeling away, you just start to peel these layers away, and you start like this. That's what I love about this book is she's really getting in there and questioning and reflecting on if we're not this westernized, assimilated, because really they want us to look the same, to act the same, to do the same. In our in a verse that we've been really kind of talking about between myself and my husband is Revelation 7:9, when he says, after this I looked, and before me there was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation,
Every tribe.
tribe, every people
Yes.
and language.
Yes.
And God just loves diversity. He
Yes.
loves it. Otherwise, it's his blueprint for heaven.
Mhm.
That's what he wants his house to be. He doesn't want us all to be the same,
Mhm.
dressed up and saying the same things and doing the same things. No, he says, I will be your center, because it says after that, standing before the throne, and
Mhm.
in the midst of them was the Lamb of God.
Mhm.
If God is our center, he loves diversity. He wants us to be different. And and so that's kind of affirmed for us that if in decolonization, I mean, here in New Zealand we do a lot of within the I in education we have cultural responsive practice, and I was thinking about that within the church. So the I guess the elements of cultural responsive practices, number one, relationship building. So hearing the unheard voice,
Mhm.
because so often, like our voices go unheard. Another one is having high expectations. Actually, when we say, oh, like for example, I've got one currently on our school board on how you give koha to your elders. So the elders will come in, they'll do some work, and then out of respect, we give them a gift. And sometimes it's money, whatever it is, because we honor their knowledge, their wisdom, their experience. And so we were told, oh, no, you're not to do that, you're not to give gifts. But it's kind of like, oh, that's not what you do. Being accountable and being able to say, oh, hang on a minute, actually you do. You must honor your elders. Cultural knowledge integration, absolutely. Having our language heard in the church. Um, Currently, where I'm at, if I there's a lot of well, I'm trying to think about how to say this. So currently, where I'm at, if my children from the school go to the church, they have to provide a translation from from the Te Reo Māori into the English.
Mhm.
And then it kind of brings out another thing that she said in the book. So whilst we're trying to find our cultural identity,
Mhm.
we also have to educate. So there's this extra layer of we're working hard to find out who we are, because I'm not a native speaker. My grandparents were beaten, and from them, both of them, fluent speakers, and they never spoke to us. And maybe on my birthday, my grandfather would speak a little bit of the reo, but he would shake, and he would be so shameful because of the trauma that they went through with their language. And so we're trying to fight, like my husband and I, we're trying to figure out for years, we've tried to figure out how can we work and learn our language? How can we do this and learn our language? And so on top of that, there's this, oh, now we have to educate everyone around us as well. And she spoke about that in the book.
Mhm.
Uh, what else? People centered approach, people at the heart of it, the gospel at the heart of it, and then again, acknowledging the bias and the stereotype. There's so many experiences I could share, of just like, yeah, yeah, just some of the thoughts that are out there that around that decolonization, and particularly in our church and in our faith, and
Mhm.
then actually reflecting on that and moving together.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. I really appreciate both of you, Giovanna and Linnea, for sharing your experience, right? And I want to just give a moment for us to catch our breath because you've been sharing some things that are deeply painful, right? Um, of people who will sing songs about Jesus and want to go to heaven and live in the earth made new, and at the same time look at you and your people and your indigenous community and experience in a way that doesn't see, as you said in Revelation, Linnea, as made in the image of God, a delight to God, and a gift of God. And so I just want to acknowledge that and just thank you for being willing to name that. And I think the other thing that came up for me is because there's so much, we're contesting, there's a lot of, people are contesting the idea of colonizing. And so I thought I would just do a little bit of, since we're all educators, the two of you are in education. My training originally was in education. I taught K-6, and I was an administrator, in a middle school for a number of years before I went to seminary. And so I just thought we'd do a little bit of teaching. And the word colonize means to take control of a people or area, especially as an extension of state power, to claim something or someone as a colony. And so when we think about, the celebration of, what came out of the Renaissance period of folks out of Europe leaving and traveling and trying to find other places. When they went to other places, they took claim of those places and displaced the people who were in those places. And unfortunately, Christianity went hand in hand with this displacement and taking away of lands, of people, right? In those areas. So when Curtis calls us to decolonize, when she invites us into this process, especially beginning with Native folks, I think it's important that we not pretend that colonization happened, because it did, and let's
Mm.
pretend that it wasn't harmful, because it was and continues to be. And let's not pretend that that trauma that, is associated with that has not gone on generationally, because it
Mm.
has, continues to do so. So circling back to Curtis and her invitation for us, I appreciate what you said, Linnea, about praying in Maori in church, right? Like, Yeah, we're going to hear that. Let's hear that today. This idea of acknowledging our elders. Yeah, we're going to do that. Giovanna, what you said, go to the powwow, right? Like go sit in those spaces where you aren't the majority, where the majority culture isn't the umbrella we live under, but to just see that no, there's more than indigenous people than that. And then Curtis then now said, um, she asks this question, or she invites us to, what does it look like? What can we learn?
I can't hear you. I don't know.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I think that she's trying to. Do we have sound? I cannot hear you yet. And so I had something that I wanted to talk to you about, like just to kind of go off of like you had somebody tell you that you were not a real Adventist. That to me, because I have heard that as well, that was probably
Mm,
the most painful thing that I have heard from a fellow Christian. Um, Specifically because becoming a Christian and becoming an Adventist was it stripped me for a time, or at least I felt, of my culture. My family had disowned me, and I felt like I had lost my native identity, like that I
yes.
was giving up my native identity to take on this Christian identity. And so when someone, because of the way that I was doing something, they said, "Oh, you're not a real Adventist," or "I thought I was working with an Adventist here. I didn't know I had to teach you too." And I was
Yeah.
just, that was so degrading, because it was, what had I given up to come into this? And there'd been other situations too where my own people had been more welcoming, had been more understanding, and I had given that up for this thing. But something that I am working on. I'm still working on this, because this is the thing. As I am coming into this, as I'm realizing that that is not what Christianity is about, like what Mr. Blake wrote, God is a diversity junkie. As I'm coming into that and coming more confidently into my faith and realizing more and more that this is who God had created me to be, I am embracing, just like Kaitlin Curtice was talking about, like she said, going into church with her coffee cup and her indigenous shirt. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I am learning how to be unapologetically indigenous, and that is
Yes.
my growing process.
Yeah.
And that is, as we're talking about decolonization and decolonizing the church, decolonizing Christianity, it is being unapologetically Christian, being unapologetically this culture that God brought us into, these people that He created us to be, that we are now fighting against that in the church, to be allowed to be who we were born as.
Yeah.
And that, I feel like, is decolonization. And so I have been learning and embracing that. Like, I am trying to collect my ribbon skirts to wear to church. And the thing was, I had been trying to blend in as a Christian so much, trying to figure out, like, to trying to blend in educational wise, like with my education as a professional, and in church, to look and walk and talk like a good, normal, no wrinkled Adventist,
Mm-hmm.
that I forgot what it meant to be an Indigenous woman. Uh,
Mm,
and that meant, and I didn't want to make too much noise. Like, even these little earrings that I have on, like I'm still combating, thinking, like, is it gonna be too loud
mm. Yeah.
if I put on the earrings that, my dad made for me? Is it gonna be too loud for some people? If I
Mm,
wore if I wear the shirt that says strong, resilient, indigenous, is that going to offend someone? Is someone not going to like the fact that I am an indigenous woman, a powerful woman? And we come across that um, as a woman, as a minority, and as a native person. We come across those things, and I am, again, I just, that's what I feel like the biggest thing about embracing that decolonization is to be unapologetically indigenous.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Cannot
Oh, we
hear you.
really can't
Sorry.
hear you, Elise.
I'm so sorry, Dillis. So there, I want to mention this again for the other part of the book. Um, there was a part in there that she had said she went to a conference. I don't know if you remember this. She said she went to a conference, and I think it was a spiritual meeting, and she said she wanted to kind of set aside that part of her that was like the Native American
Yeah,
activist, or like
yeah,
that Native part of her. Um, and that part stood out for me, and I think it kind of fed that part of me that's like, I need to calm down the
and
Native,
it's,
and because there's never been a time where I felt like I could set aside the part that's indigenous in me. And I
yeah,
feel like I've always had to try and mute that so that it's
yeah,
not offensive to people. And so I think that what I'm learning from her, and what I learned from a lot of people who are like who are mixed race, because I am also mixed race, but I'm predominantly Native American. Like, I'm in predominantly Lakota. But for the people who can, like, they can pass as Caucasian or pass as Native, I think that there has been a part of me that struggles with that a little bit. Those people don't have to necessarily come across some of the stereotypes that I do.
yeah,
However, what I have found is that they are the ones that are most fearless towards it. Like, I have so many of my friends are half Native and half Caucasian, and they embrace that culture. They're embracing. They're like, bring the smoke, I'll take it. Like, they are fighting for Indigenous people, and I think that one of the things that she's talking to us about is like, if you're going to be a part of a culture, don't be a part of just the dream catchers and the fun stuff. Be a part
yeah,
of the struggle. Like,
yeah,
you be a part of the struggle. Get down in the ditches with people. And I think that that's what Kaitlin Curtice does. And I think that's what she encourages all of us to do.
yeah. We've um we've had a look at our census and our statistics in terms of how many Maori are in the Adventist church, and there's this we've kind of come across this what do you call it? It's not a saying, but what we saw from the data was that Maori are more likely to believe in Star Wars than they are in the Adventist church. And
Oh,
like
wow.
it, we were like, oh, haha, that's that's funny, because I do know a friend of mine is he gets out his Star Wars um thing, and they do Star Wars stuff. But like when you dig a bit deeper into that, we're trying to figure out why. Like we question ourselves, like why would they believe that more than coming into Jesus? And I know for a lot of us here, when I attend our Māori events, um, there's this because of the colonization, and it's something that I'm trying to work through is because of the colonization, um, because our founding document was very much based on we were one of the last countries to be colonized, and by the time the British came here, they were very, very well versed in colonizing a nation. So the missionaries came first, and the missionaries actually wrote our founding document, the Treaty of Waitangi. And so there was this deep belief that if the missionaries are writing it, and if the wording is similar to the Bible, then that's who that's what this agreement will be. And then soon after, of course, lands were taken. There was wars, there was legislation, and so there's this what do you call it? There's this connection between the church and God, and our lands being taken. So then, when we're trying to meet our Maori people, there's this additional thing that I feel like lately it's gotten bigger and bigger, that Maori are saying, "Oh no, we don't want to know this God that's taken our lands, that's taken our culture, that's taken our language." And so, really, to reach them, we have to have an approach that is, you know, you have you were sharing, we have to have the language, but yeah, I'm still working through it, but that's kind of where I'm at the moment. And that's what I love too about the end part of her book, because she said, I wrote this book and this is where I'm at now, but in 2 more years, I'll be a different person and I'll know more and I've talked to more people. And so, even looking back on kind of my journey lately, in terms of who am I as a Christian, as a mother, as a principal, as a leader, as a Māori, like I can see kind of where I'm moving to. And perhaps, I'll look at this later and go, oh man, I could have said this or that, or I'll know a lot more. But at the moment, I'm thinking about our people and how, like, for us currently in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we don't have a Māori ministry. So I went to Holbrook. I went to Giovanna's school
Okay.
because I'm curious. Because when we want to meet with Indigenous people and see how are you working as Christians. So we also went to Australia. And I presented at Avondale University over there. Um, and and then we wanted to go to Holbrook. We visited the Rehoboth School as well and looked at their curriculum. Um, yeah, because we're trying to find out for us here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we don't have a strategy. We don't have a Treaty of Waitangi policy that protects us. Everything's kind of left up to chance. Maybe we'll do some. Maybe we'll reach out to the Māori community. Nobody knows how. There's no kind of collective effort. We used to have camp meetings. Now we don't. And then even within thinking as well, we have some people that say, "Oh no, you must," like, even for our own people, they say, no, we just leave all of that behind. There's kind of that thought as well. Yeah. Can you
So
hear me, Delise?
here,
My head off. I'm getting a bit
Can
hot
you hear
here.
me now? How about now?
yes, we can hear you now.
I
Yay!
can hear you.
Awesome. This has been a very rich conversation. I appreciate it again hearing you both just like lean into your experiences and just naming that for us and giving us a window into Native folks. Because again, we don't get to hear your stories, right? We don't, especially as someone living in the contiguous for the 50 contiguous states that are here. Someone's going to check me on my geography, but for the US, I've had the privilege of being in New Zealand, and I have always been just so moved, Linnea, when a haka has been performed or presented to us when we have visited. And it's so moving to just be a part of that experience, because as you named, this is the diversity that God is very comfortable with. We're the ones who have to push back against any move to continue to erase our stories, so that the fullness of God can be seen. Um,
Mm.
I was at lunch today and someone asked the question about, they said, hey, why don't we have generational Adventists anymore? And I said, because the younger generation, they're having a problem that our walk doesn't match our talk,
Mm.
and they are holding us accountable to choices that we have made. And so, Curtis invites us to rediscover God, right, as a result of leaning into Native identity and to talk about belonging. And so I want to pivot a little bit and talk about her emphasis on the deep spiritual connection between Indigenous peoples and the land, which is very different than the institutionalized approaches to sacred spaces. We revere, or we talk about how we treat our sanctuary, i.e., the building, but we don't talk about how we treat the sanctuary, the body where God wants to live in us, right? And so I'm wondering, Curtis talks about um, leaning into nature and bringing practices that come out of indigenous spaces back into Christian spaces. And I'm wondering, what are your thoughts about that? Or are there any practices that you can think of that would work well with helping us be better stewards of our lands, be better stewards of our body, be better stewards of our time, especially as Christians who identify as being Seventh day Adventists?
Um, I'm not sure if this is going to directly answer your question, but I will give you a little bit of kind of what this has meant for like our family
Yeah.
as we're looking into this.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes, so this part of me that's, working on becoming unapologetically indigenous,
Yeah.
I'm sharing that journey with my family as we're doing this. And one of the things that we do is to bring in the Sabbath on Friday evening, we'll burn sage in our house and we'll go through the entire house and smudge our house to bring in the Sabbath.
Mm-hmm.
And there are little things that we do like that. We take our children to the villages, like there's usually remnants of where native villages were, and we go through those places almost like we're walking through a cemetery. Like, just be careful where you're stepping. Like, we're praying as we're going through this, because just to honor the people who lived there. And then we go through it historically. Like, the sign will say, the village this used to be a village of native people, and they mysteriously disappeared one day, and it has the dates. And we as a family discuss that that's when smallpox was spreading through the reservation systems, or through the reservations. And we talk about how that got there. And so we are just very respectful of the truth behind the history. So
Mm-hmm.
not just what we're told about it or what we read about it, but looking deeper into those spaces. So even those grounds that we walk on, looking deeper into what actually happened in those spaces.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that there's a lot about, like, people have asked me, like, where do you draw the line with when you're as a Christian and these things that you're trying to bring in from native culture, where's the line at? And I think, where, and I tell them too, I sorry, but where does it contradict with the Bible? So at what point in the Bible would there be something that says I shouldn't be burning sage? And in fact, you'll find things that support the burning of sage or the burning of incense, to create a prayerful environment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so there are a lot of things that we can bring into it. You will find more and more that there are more connections than contradictions between these cultures. There are ways to embrace the way that we pray. So, like the smudging with the eagle feathers, that eagle feathers, the wings of eagles, like the feathers that we smudge with our sage, it has so much biblical symbolism in it, to be under, to God's wings, the wings of eagles, but
Yes.
for that eagle wing to be what is covering over you before you have a prayer. There's
Mm-hmm.
so much beautiful symbolism
Mm-hmm.
if we allow ourselves to
Mm-hmm.
learn about it
Mm-hmm.
and not be afraid
Mm-hmm.
of what our culture has to offer us.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. That is so beautiful because I immediately thought of this hymn, under his wings, we're safely abiding, right? There's a psalm that talks about this idea of being under the wings of God and this invitation. Because to be honest with you, I don't know about much about smudging. I'd actually have to look it up, right? And to hear you now say, oh, this is a way that my family is intentionally bringing in Sabbath. We are creating the sacred time and space and connecting indigenous practices or cultures, and we're using it and connecting it to what we believe. I'm going. Can I do that? Is that cultural appropriation if we try to do that in our house? Like, right?
No, girl, do it.
You know what I mean? Like it's this is an opportunity for us to share, and it enriches the experience of our being assimilated into the vine, right? Of being brought into the family of God, because all of us are adopted in. None of us identify as the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We are grafted in. Hallelujah to the Lamb, right? Like if we're being grafted in, when I hear you say that, Giovanni, it makes me think about, the fact that God is always revealing God's self to all of humanity, and it is
Mhm.
whether or not we are aware of the frequency of the Spirit when the Spirit is speaking so we can see. But I feel like I'm preaching, so let me stop. Linnea, what about you?
Yeah. um, in New Zealand, in Aotearoa, whenua is the name that we have for land, and it's also the name that we use for a woman's placenta. So, and the woman's placenta is very special. So when a child is born, and I guess for me, have you, when you have your child, we're women here. When you have your child, I remember the moment I saw my son for the first time, and I looked at him and I knew, your life was going to change forever. And you just knew that, man, there's this connection that no one would ever, this will always be my son. He's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And that's how we view our land. It's so sacred. And then the placenta of the woman is of the child is taken either into a tree or buried into underneath a tree or into the earth, so that there will always be that connection. And then from then forward, you are a kaitiaki, or you're a guardian. You're not the owner. No one owns the land. So there's no sections, you have your tribal areas, but no, it belongs to everyone. But you, like for us as Māori, we are the caretakers. And that's been a huge part of our political or even our ways as a people, is protecting our environment. And she mentioned the Whanganui River, um, and I was so blessed when I saw that in the book, because when I was 16, I went on a journey with there was a special programming, and you start at the top of the river and you canoe the whole way down, and most of it is through national park, but there's definitely a deep sense of connection to the land, connection to the waters, and respect, and it's our responsibility to care for it. And our mana, that's our prestige, our honor, is tied to the land. Like if you don't look after it, you kind of shamed, I guess, for it. It's that, yeah, and of course it was our main source of resource, so we had ways of caring for it. So, for example, yesterday we had a national holiday for Matariki, and so that's when the Pleiades is what you call it, but in Polynesia we call it Matariki, and it rises for the first time in the sky. People get up early in the morning, and it's the second time that we put it as a national day, and we celebrate it because then we know it's the start of our new year. So that's the time when we go, okay, now it's time to start planting our kumara, and And so, yeah, land is very important to us, and having a place to stand on the land, caring for it. Yeah, and then I guess I've so when I guess what I'm thinking of is um, how the names change as well. So we have, when the British came over, and then they said we're going to name this place da 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 da, and then they put their names on, but then also the names are representative of basically war heroes who massacred people, and being able to, I guess, being open and aware that there is a trauma there, and that there is like even just like a acknowledgement. Um, for example, tomorrow I'm going to Auckland, which is a couple of hours away, and we're having our Adventist education meeting. We're having a conference for 3 days there, and the Adventist Education Office. And I've been thinking about it a lot, because I think, man, God's timing or God's placement, um, the Adventist Education Building in Auckland that it operates out of is called the Fencibles. And the Fencibles was the army that basically massacred my tribe, um, and to the extent where we had a church, and my people thought, oh, if we run into the church, they won't hurt us because we're in the church. Well, they locked the doors and they burnt the church to the ground with
My God.
my people in it. And if they tried to run out, they shot them. And so tomorrow, for my meeting, I sit in the house that's named after the army that did that. And you just think, wow. But it's I'll start by speaking in my language, and then I've been thinking, to be able to testify to my colleagues there that, hey, me just standing in this house, you know, this my voice was to be silenced. I'm not even supposed to be here.
Mm,
But then, working through that, and for them to understand, like, there's places for us as Indigenous people that we go to that do feel unsafe, or even just an acknowledgement to say, hey, we understand what happened here. And there's good places as well. But I'm just thinking of that because I'm going there tomorrow. And it's been playing on my mind. What else? I should have been writing notes like you, Giovanna, so that I could refer back to.
so could I
Um,
we just pause for a second, Linnea, just to sit with you in that, right?
yeah.
Because this idea of what does it look like to um, reconnect?
Well, to reconnect for me, I went to, like, every year we have a memorial service for my tribe. And from that time when the church was burnt, we left. My tribe left there. So, and we called it Te Araroi Mata, the Trail of Tears. And we never went back. So I've never lived in that area. I've always known that I came from there, but we've never, like, lived there. And in fact, we we were about 2 years ago, we were able to purchase 1 acre of land in that tribal area, in the proper tribal boundaries where we lived. And so we purchased that 1 acre, and we used to be, yeah, I'm probably going off track. Yeah, there was so much, we were international traders. We had trade routes to Sydney, California. Peach groves was a huge, orchards, flower mills, all taken. Well, if we're talking about the land, and that's resource, that's economics, that's providing for your family, that's food to eat, that's jobs, that's education. We had schools, we had three churches there as well. And so every year at dawn, we're able to go as a tribe, and we meet and we celebrate. And I don't know if you've been to New Zealand, but each tribe has like a beautiful ancestral house with carvings and things like that. Um, yeah, so we've got a cow shed at the moment. Yeah. Anyway, I've gone off track. Um, yeah, that's what I think when I'm sitting there. I think, wow. But also the hope as well. That if God in His story has placed me here with that knowledge and understanding, and I'm able to share that, or I feel responsible to. I feel that I have to be a voice to say, "Hey, I'm still here,"
Mhm.
and that when you don't when you don't teach our children our language, or
Mhm.
when you don't speak, when you don't allow us to speak our language, or to even share our grief,
Mhm.
then what do we do with,
Mhm.
we it's this justice that we talk about. We have to push through these hard times. We have to listen and be able to be heard,
Mhm.
you know?
I appreciate you saying that, Linnea, because I think when we're talking about the you cannot heal what you don't reveal.
Mm,
So when we don't name the fact that you're asking me to sit in this building as a direct descendant of people who were murdered in this space, where we have not acknowledged that,
yeah.
which this is not the good God that I believe in. This was
Mm,
done in the name of God. And when you have younger people who refuse to follow this Jesus, this God, it's because we're unwilling to name the things that have happened and allowed people to process their grief and to
yeah.
lament. And we don't get to tell you how long you grieve, and we don't get to tell you what that grief looks like. And the first part is just to let's just acknowledge it, and then to sit with you in that. And I am so sorry
Yeah.
that that has been a part of the Maori people's story. And I know this is that all of us can name similar atrocities.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things you said about the placenta and planting of the tree, my grandmother on my mother's side had birthed six children on the land that was theirs, and every child's umbilical cord, when it fell off, was planted with a breadfruit tree.
Beautiful.
And again, I am on my mother's side the fourth person born out of enslavement. Um, and again, as I said, I don't know where we come from. And I just think it's fascinating when I hear you talk about the placenta with the tree, to think that this practice was indigenous. We just don't, I
Mm,
don't know which tribe, right? The fact that that was a practice lets me know that this came from African peoples,
yeah.
and so that's just beautiful. This idea of connecting birth with returning to the earth, all of these things. I don't know, Giovanna, what about you? Is there anything that you could say that's a native practice? Well, you did give us, I'm sorry. You talked about the stretching, you did that. So let's segue to, as our time is winding up, to the last part of what Curtis challenges us: justice as a spiritual practice, right? Like that's one of the things she calls us to. She says there's no separation between being a person who follows Jesus and injustice, that justice is part and parcel of the work, um, of a Christian. Here's a quote. Um, She says, if we cannot solve all the world's problems, we can at least make sure that as leaders, we're actively speaking and working to dismantle systems that oppress. This means, excuse me, the communion table in our churches is a political table. This means the communion table is a table that speaks on social issues of oppression. This means that communion table is a table set for those no one else wants to serve. The communion table is a table for all bodies and all souls and all people seeking to know what it might mean to feel the sacred pulse of the mystery around us and in us. I love that quote because the Jesus that I follow always made room for everyone at the table. Everyone was welcome at the table, right? And so I'm wondering, how do you see how might viewing justice as spiritual practice change the way we approach faith and activism? Or how do you see a relationship between our spirituality and justice and the work of justice? Either one of those questions as we're getting ready to wind up.
All right. And so we're going wild here. So
Go. Let's
So
go.
we're gonna talk about, because I see that we're running quite a bit out of time, but I actually took an entire semester class on just this,
Oh
like
wow.
Wow.
just this topic, like um how, like, social justice in the professional field, like how do you do that? And so I would argue that this is something, because it's your faith, because it's what you believe. It's not just your spiritual journey or spiritual responsibility, but it's also a professional responsibility.
Okay.
And I think that as we're looking at that, as we think like this communion table,
Mm-hmm.
think about, especially when we're all working within the Adventist church, or we're working for the church, or wherever it is that we're working, whatever field we're in, we make space for people at that table.
Mm-hmm.
Like it is our, as we're sitting at that table, we make space
Mm-hmm.
like that. That's our responsibility. We are not gatekeepers.
That's right.
We welcome the marginalized onto that table with us,
Yeah.
because and even and especially because we had to fight our way there.
My God.
And so, and that is why we do it.
Mm-hmm.
That is why we do it.
Mm-hmm.
And not that we had to fight our way onto God's table, because you're correct. He welcomed us into that space.
Yeah.
But sometimes the institutions make people believe that they have to fight their way there.
Yeah.
Because, and then when we have gone through our journey and we're going through it, and we come to this realization that this is who God has called us to be,
Mm-hmm.
that He doesn't limit who's on that table,
Mm-hmm.
then we make sure other people know that too.
Yes.
That is who He's called us. That's the calling He has brought us all into.
Wow. That's beautiful.
Nice. I agree. I think it's like having a seat at the table, and then also a seat at the table where decisions get made, and then being able to be heard, and also moving at the speed of trust.
Yeah.
So to be able for us to have this trusting relationship, um, you know, I like what you said. It has to be at our speed and in our time and in our way, and allowing us to have that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
That's
And
beautiful.
also, if getting, I like what Giovanna said too, like getting down in the trenches, like we've talked a lot he, with my husband being the pastor of his church. um what does it actually mean to have a kaupapa Māori, which is a Māori embracing church? And it's to do with like, um, how we treat each other, manakitanga, how we support one another, making sure that we've been intentional with our te reo, our language, what's important to us. We had yesterday at church, we had some visitors come in, and she said, "Oh, I was so relieved that my child was able to make a little bit of noise in the church, because I don't go to my other church often because she's not allowed to there, kind of thing. And then we have like a live stream next door, so the children are able to make noise. Or And she said, oh, it just feels like a breath of fresh air being able to, we do a lot of testimony time where our people are able to get up and share how God has moved for them during the week. Um, and we after church we had a practice for it. We do like we call it kapahaka, which is like a Māori dance that
Hmm.
we're doing the haka as well. So but in a Christian context, so the words and the understandings around um, us as Christians, and then being able to share that in our community. We've got a date coming up where we'll be sharing that in a concert. So, and just how we also talked about how we've got a place that we want to go to, but it's the journey along the way.
Hmm.
Like, how are we journeying together as a people, as a congregation, as a family? We call it whānau. How are we journeying together? And yeah,
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. We could spend hours here, ladies, talking about this book, and I just want to say to you, Linnea, kia ora for your
kia
time,
ora.
and to you, Giovanna, Pila Mayaya,
Ah,
Maya,
very
yes,
very close. Pilamia.
Pilamia. There you go. I'm trying. You see, I'm
Yeah,
phonetics. I'm trying to learn how to do it.
Yeah, I love it.
To both of you. And I want to invite those of you who joined us today, or those of you who are watching later, um, like, share, subscribe with someone about what you've heard from us today. Please read the book if you haven't read it. Think about what it looks like to decolonize the way we do our faith practices, especially learning from Indigenous people. Our next book circle will be September 13th, and we're going to be joining you right here from this space. We'll be sharing what book we'll be reading when we do that. But just please take care of yourselves, get to know someone's story, and let's live the gospel. Let's truly make space at the table for all God's people to find home and community. Take care.
Thank you.
thank you.